Well, what my mother told me was, when I was a boy, if you're hungry, get two and peel some of them vegetables and you get your tea soon. I've been doing it ever since.
So, Grandma, what year were you born?
1935 in Strathmore Hospital in Russell Street, which is now I don't want to say B&B, or it's up for sale anyway, but it's still there.
In the Strathfield Hospital?
Mm. And I think it was a hospital, it was where babies were born anyway.
Born 1932. Yes.
1932.
When the Harbour Bridge was born too.
That's right, you're the same age as the Harbour Bridge.
It was just a bit ahead of me. It was in March and I was in May. And my eldest brother went to the opening as a boy cub. He lived in Lithgow at the time, and he went down with the boy cubs. March across the bridge when it opened.
Well, I was the third child, the second daughter in the family at the time.
Third child, second daughter.
They lived in Howick Street at the time, down opposite where Woolworths are now, and the doctor lives in the house they lived in then. And then they moved out to Havana Street, which is in South Bathurst, and I was about 4, I suppose.
Which child were you? There was like, how many kids were in your
I was the
family?
middle.
You were the middle one?
Mm.
Right smack bang in the middle?
Yep.
There were, how many were there? Were there 7?
There was 9 actually.
9.
One little fella died as a baby. He had a hole in the heart, which wouldn't be any problem whatsoever nowadays. And you could even operate on that before birth nowadays, for a hole in the heart. But anyway, we lost that little fella.
That's right.
I know that when I was about 4, my father was sent to Junee. He was an engine driver. He wasn't then, he was a fireman.
He went over
We
there.
had to go to Junee for him to get his driving licence for the trains. And my mum's mum was still around, and my mum couldn't stand being away, so far away from her mother. So I started school over there, but we were only there 2 years tops, I'd say, and they came back and lived in Havana Street, which was only round the corner from her mum.
Well, I must have been fairly young when I left Wallerawing. We came from, I was born in Lithgow, and we resided in Wang. My father worked on the railway as well as me. I really can't remember anything but when we came to Bathurst. And we stayed at the Victoria Hotel, which was a pub very close actually to the place that my father rented then was one block away from that. And my father was only 1 block away from his work. So he was a goods clerk, and he worked on the railway. And that was only we only lived 1 block from his work when we started out.
I started school then at the Little South Bathurst School in Band Street, and my mother and her sisters all went, I'm not sure about her brother, they all went through South Bathurst School, which was then probably up to, they didn't go to high school I don't think, but I only went there till it was time to go into 3rd class because the school didn't go any higher when I was there, so I had to go up to the demonstration school in George Street from 3rd class to 6th class. But the generations that carried on, even though that little school is no longer a school, they built a new school up the top of Vanna Street. So it went, my mother went there, I went there, my children went there, and their children,
Her grandchildren.
my son's children, all went through the Bathurst South School, public school.
How many generations is that? 4?
Well, it was Mum, me, your father and you. So, there's another lady here and she's got one ahead of me, she's got 5 generations.
Like,
Oh, my mother was a very happy soul. She was always singing when she was working around the house and what have you. Dad, I don't know. It was only when serious misbehaviour that Dad was called on for discipline. Mum generally give us a whack if we misbehaved.
but then he'd come in.
I suppose with a tribe of kids we generally ironed out things pretty well between ourselves.
When we got to high school I became friends, there was 4 of us. 2 of us have remained friends, and we're still friends now.
Who are they?
That's Margaret Bullock, she was, and now she's Margaret Gord, and we still see each other for birthdays and Christmas and church gatherings. We meet up.
Who was the naughtiest out of all 9 of you?
I'd say me.
Really? Yes. Middle child syndrome.
I gave myself a haircut one time with a reverse mohawk straight down the middle of my forehead. Yeah.
Yeah, what are some of the more...
I'm not impressed with that.
That's so good. Just using a pair of scissors?
No, with a pair of
With clippers, like...
clippers up the forehead, straight up the middle.
That's awesome.
Didn't amuse me parents at all. I didn't get ironed for that. I thought it was a pretty wild one, but I didn't get a crack for that. It was too naughty, I think.
So you're saying you were not naughty ever? There was not one naughty thing you ever did?
Well, I can remember a Miss Gurr who got very red in the face, slapping me on the legs, but I don't know what for. But I can tell you this, that my cousin and I crossed the road coming home from school, and we found this beautiful string of pearls laying on the footpath. So we took them home, and Mum said take them to school the next day, which we did. And the dear old Miss Barker, who was the headmaster, she said, well, you must... Turned out the lady who lived in the house on the corner, they were her pearls, and she said, and if you get a reward, you don't keep it, you give it to the Red Cross. So Mum wasn't very impressed. I can't remember whether we got a reward, but I can remember we weren't allowed to keep it if we did get one.
So what can you remember of the war?
Hmm?
Can you talk about
The
that?
war, well, my father had to dig a trench, even in the rented property. We dug a trench up the back yard of our house in 34 Rocket, and my father was a warden that used to check people to see that they had their houses properly blacked out during the war when they had a practice for blackouts, and Dad was a warden for that.
So that's just in case there was an air raid.
Yeah,
Everybody's knew.
and they have, some people had very elaborate air raid shelters, but we didn't. We just had it was a trench dug up the back, and my father, being a railway man, could get second-hand sleepers. So the dirt that they dug out to dig the ditch, they put put sleepers over the top, then they put the dirt back on top of the sleepers to cover it up. And we were very fortunate because our air raid shelter was out of the reach of the dwelling that we lived in, the house that we lived in. If there had been any collapse of the house, it wouldn't have been anywhere near our air raid shelter. Some people had to have their air raid shelters a lot closer to the house.
Which might make the house
But
collapse.
we had a fairly big block of land we lived on.
I can just remember we got to school, but it was 4 blocks to walk, and there was a hill at the end. On the day the war ended, Zelma says they hadn't got to school, they were still getting to school, but I remember getting to school and then being sent home about 11 o'clock or something like that. You could have the rest of the day off.
But it didn't worry us a great deal, the war. And one little trick we did have, they had a lot of Italian people that were interned during the war, not war prisoners, but people interned, and they put them in what used to be the race course in Bathurst when I was a child, and it was taken over by the army, and then part of it was used to intern these people that resided and in Australia, but their home countries were at war with Australia and England and what have you, and they were interned just on the strength that they were of another nationalities, and they had Italian people housed in this 4BOD, and we as larrikin boys used to pinch apples out of the orchards that weren't far away from them and roll them under the fence to the people
To the
that
POW
were
Italian.
interned inside. So now we were pretty good sports to them, I thought. And I suppose they became happy residents of Australia because they were treated well, especially by us larrikin boys.
So anyway, we had to do the intermediate, and I turned for 14 on the 30th of October, and I'd done the intermediate, so I didn't want to go on to, in those days if you had a dozen people in 5th form staying on to do the leaving certificate, might be 20, most people left school, so I had to leave school I had to get permission from the headmaster. Arranged that I had to go to Tech for 6 months or so till I turned 15. I couldn't go and get a job straight away. So I went to Tech and I was trying to learn shorthand and typing.
What was your first job and how old were you?
Oh, I started doing milk runs when I did milk runs at primary school for the man that used to deliver our milk. I did a job of delivering milk for him, Arnie Shoot. And then when I went to high school, I did a bigger run with another chap called Gomer Howe. And that was while I was going to school. Yeah.
A job came up in what was then the Western Stores and the Edgeleys, and I don't know who told me, somebody told me about it. And my sister had worked there early on. Anyway, I got an office job there, and that's where I saw Zelma a lot. And there were a lot of South Bathurst girls. We all used to ride to school together on our push bikes. Not to school, to the shop. And it was a fairly big department store at the time, and I was in the office work.
Then when I joined the railway as an apprentice, I only got 28 shillings a week. And we had to work 8 hours a day. And I really, at the time, couldn't see the value in it.
I got sent to Sydney to Charters at the time. They made typewriters and bookkeeping, or taught you how to work a bookkeeping machine. So I went and stayed with an auntie in Sydney and got a train in. She had a friend that showed me how to get into town to get to the thing. It took me a while to realise there were tabulators, and I was trying to line everything up without the tabulator, but it was a lot easier when you found out about the tabulators. So I came back and continued working there for 7. No, it was 7. No, it wasn't. It might have been 3 years.
I always enjoyed the work. I don't know. Not everybody does. I worked my whole life on the, well, not all my whole life, but 40 years of my working life I worked on the railway, and I worked myself up to being a foreman. And I used to enjoy instructing the apprentices, and I used to get along pretty well with my workmates, I think, all around. Most of them still speak to me, that I still live in the course.
And one of the men owned the hardware shop department. He worked and he got a shop in Keppel Street and asked me would I go and be the secretary, sort of do the accounts at his little shop.
I resigned from the railway in 1988. I resigned from the railway, and I took on the job just to fill in till my super became available to me, and that was just a fill-in job at a fish finger factory where they used to make fish fingers and seafood products.
I left the man. I was in tears about that, and I had to tell the man in Keppel Street I could get a job with the council. My father said, don't go working for that town clerk, but anyway, I went there. And I worked there for 7 years and did the bookkeeping machine business. Got fairly well paid, and I was pregnant with my first child when I decided I'd leave work. When
I started off, of course, I had lady bosses which I'd never had before. They said, why do you think of having a lady for a boss? I said, if they're the boss, they're the boss. I said, you do what you're instructed or requested to do. So that didn't bother me either. I got on pretty well with the ladies. In fact, my wife didn't think there was any men out there.
Terry, in the meantime, joined the ANZ Bank, and he was working here, and they said, no, he won't have to go away. And naturally, for our mum, he got sent to Canberra, I think, first. And then he met a girl over there that he married, and they had 3 children eventually. But they lived in Bankstown in Sydney. So they'd bring their children up here and have them christened down in our little church. And occasionally Mum would go down. We didn't go there to stay very often. And occasionally they'd come up here. So she'd more or less lost another son. But the 2 girls stayed here right through.
Can you remember meeting Grandma?
Oh, well, I met Grandma when I was delivering milk to their house. So I had a bit of a shine for Margie long before I started going with her. I thought she was pretty good looking sort, even when I was a young boy.
But he had quite a few other ones. He's still got photos of them, Chloe.
Listen, she's dogging me now, dear.
Can you remember seeing him when he was doing the milk runs?
wouldn't have made a lot of impression on me. I'm younger than him. He just lived in the same area. My girlfriend used to go to the Methodist church, where he went to the Methodist church when I went past it down to my church. And
Yeah.
So when did you and Grandma first start seeing each other properly?
Well, I used to go to church regular as a boy, and
I had to go to Tech.
Margaret had to go to Tech, and I went to see Handel's Messiah presented by the William Street Methodist Church, and as it so happened, we had interval in the middle of the show, and Margaret had, the light had gone out on the push bike and she was walking home from Tech. So I walked her home from Tech, and that was the start of a long encounter.
Do you remember your wedding? Did you was it yeah, can you remember much of that day?
I know I feel guilty about it because of course I was working with the council. I invited all those people, and all the aunts and uncles and everybody came. Dad's sisters and everyone. There's like those proof pictures you could see. And the day before we were supposed to go down to the church and have a practice. And what did I do? Left me poor father at the gate, and he had to give me away, never took him down to the church, so that was one thing I felt very guilty about. And at the reception I was naughty again because I was magging. This Muriel was there, magging to her and the people I was working with, instead of working my way all around the relatives that Johnny said once. See, all your relatives came.
Where did you go for the honeymoon?
We went down the mountains and down to Wollongong and round Canberra, down where they were building the Snowy Mountain electric scheme. They had high water marks marked on the banks of the hills where the water would fill up to. and we could see the villages that they were going to, some parts they dismantled and put elsewhere, and some of them they just flooded. Yeah, all down around the snow area, but of course we were married in February, so we had the summer months down there, all around there and that. Yeah.
Personal. We went down from Bathurst to Sydney looking for somewhere to stay, and our friends came with us, and we ended up booking in at the at the Ivanhoe Hotel in Blackheath.
New Ivanhoe and Blackheath.
So Mrs. Gordon tells me as we drove out in John's father's car of the tennis club it was, down where the ambulance station is, we nearly went under a truck. We were nearly killed. That was the start of it. We get down the mountains. We didn't leave because I was having a good time. I didn't want to go anywhere. And we went down. We get to the Ivanhoe Hotel, and you can't get in. There's no way.
Locked up like a tomb.
So then we went further down. Still, we went to the hydro. John wandered all through the hydro.
It was open.
Couldn't find a soul. So
walk in.
we find a bit of a tree spot. I slept on the back seat and he slept on the front seat in the back track.
And this is your honeymoon.
Yes. But wait, there's more. So then we went down and got to Woonona, I think it's called, this little place on the south coast. And we booked into a hotel there, and we were given twin beds. Anyway, I wasn't going to bed, no way was I going to bed. I'm up at the window like that, looking out into the street. And I got back down into my bed and I heard a noise, a crash. So I jumped up to the window and I watched and watched. And I've got a bit of paper here somewhere with a bit of it in it. And I saw this man come up the street, up the street, up the street, and then he leans into the jewellers and he starts taking the jewels. So I yelled out to John, "There's a man over the road robbing the jeweller's shop." And he had pink pyjamas.
Got me pink pyjamas on.
He went flying down the stairs and called out in the bar, and he's running across the road. No one else was coming for a while. Anyway, we couldn't do much because I didn't actually see him break the window. So there was a little bit in the paper the next day, and then that made them, then they said to us, "What's your address?" And I said, "What did we tell them, 179 Havana or Rocket Street?" And they said, oh, we're very sorry, we didn't know you were on honeymoon." So then we go to this beautiful motel. For those days it was beautiful. And we had one night in the motel, and then we went and slept in the bush, in the car in the bush, so we could afford to go back and have another night in the motel. So that was, I don't think there was anything else startling, but I wouldn't tell anybody when I came home for years. I couldn't admit.
That's one of the best honeymoons I've ever heard in my life. That's hilarious.
Oh dear. Yes, we kept it quiet.
Do you want to talk about you and Whiskey getting married and the first years of you guys getting married for a bit?
Oh, well, I gave up work.
Did you like your work as well?
Well, I didn't mind the work, but we were like it says on that thing, when you had a baby you stayed home and looked after it sort of thing. You didn't, but a lot of the girls that were my age, once they got their kids off to school, they were back at work as quick as a went into a flat up in the corner through the park, only a couple of blocks away, and we were living up there. And we tried to hand wash, and we discovered that was a damn hard thing to do, wash sheets and towels and whatever. So John had his push bike, and poor old Mum and Dad, he'd put all the dirty washing in the suitcase, and he'd drive down to 2 blocks and round the corner to Mum's, and he'd do all our washing in her washing machine, which meant you had to light the copper and put them through the ringer and all this, but Mum and Dad wouldn't have cared.
Have you guys got any stories about Kazza or Adam being naughty as kids? Or anything interesting that you had to deal with Kazza or Dad being kids? You know, the good times, the bad times, funny times, the naughty times.
It's just, I remember that I've only found out in later years, like that Carolyn, she wanted a bike for Christmas, and she nagged and nagged and nagged, and we had to go and get it on the Christmas Eve, I think. And I never knew until many years later that Adam said that he got his bike in bits and pieces. And Carolyn,
But she did, got it for birthdays and Christmas and...
Wait, so Dad just went and like bought his own,
John must have had an old second-hand one, and he gradually...
built it?
See, Adam never...
Never got a brand new bike.
Well, Carolyn learned dancing, and Adam, your father used to take Adam to soccer, and I'd have to... And well, when Gavin was home, I don't know, she had to go to soccer dancing after school, and John went to soccer with Adam. You know, I never even thought of it at the time. It was just, I said to John, oh, you'll have to get her one. She'll be that cranky tomorrow when she doesn't have it.
Because I know for a fact that Dad would have been a little bit naughty when he was a kid.
He did a few silly things. He was out at Kelso, and he should have been home. So he grabbed this damn ute that belonged to someone, and he was trying to drive it home. And the police saw he couldn't drive and everything. So I stuck by him better than his father did through that business. I went to court and did that with him. He was in a couple of accidents, but
Oh, that accident, he was just recovering from one. He went to Sydney with his mate, and they finished up in another bloody accident.
it was the boy that went to be a minister, you know his name if I could think of it. And they turned
He
the
finished up with a punctured diaphragm.
That's why he's got that big scar right round him.
Down his back.
And I've
He
got-
might have
if I
told
could
some of the
find it,
girls
I
that
might be able to
it
find
was a shark bite, but it
Yeah.
wasn't.
I'd like.
I couldn't remember.
I read this yesterday, and I think
Oh,
it's
I'm
stupid.
amused for Joe.
Sing it, say it.
There's 2 blondes walking along the street on opposite sides of the road, and one yelled out to the other one, "How do I get to the other side?" She said, "You're already on the other side." I just read that.
I like that one.
Probably over
You're
2.
already
I
there,
don't,
kid.
I don't wonder it's gone into the bin. I threw it in here.
You're already there.
So what do you think are the best qualities in a person to make a person a
Honesty.
good person?
Honesty in their life and their work. it doesn't matter whether you're working for you or for a boss, you should give good work. Good work. You must do your best at it.
What do you reckon?
Leg out.
Leg out?
I'm reckoning it's about right.
What do you think is the most important things in life?
Oh, I think your family's the most important thing in life, and your work, supplements that. You've got to be happy in your work to be happy in your family. And I did that all my life. I wasn't aggressive in my life at all, I don't think. I think I was pretty even-tempered sort of a bloke. And I got on pretty well with all of the chaps I worked with. I don't think there's anyone that I didn't get along with in the workforce. But enjoying your work is most important, to have an enjoyable life, because it's a large portion of your life is your work. when you make things and they're useful things, it's very gratifying when you do make something that is useful, people use, or you use, or other people use. It's good, it's satisfying when you produce something like that. And in our job we made items, and they were individual items that you made, and they were used in the workforce, on the railway, throughout. Would you lay with me in a field of stone when my need was great? Would you lay with me? You me with your dying breath. Yeah, that was. Your father was surprised that I sang that. I said, well, that was on when I was a boy.